So Tim Bradley and Lucas Matthysse have been sparring. They were sparring last week, and I believe they were also sparring this week. And Tim Bradley's given several interviews where he's been talking about what the experience was like. If you just do a Google search, I'm sure you'll find some of the interviews, and he did a couple, I think, radio interviews as well. And, you know, not surprisingly, Tim Bradley says that Lucas Matthysse hits extremely hard. Now, Bradley's obviously not fighting, you know, until later on in the year. Matthysse is fighting much more, you know, much sooner than Bradley is. So Matthysse going into that sparring would obviously be a lot sharper and fitter than Tim Bradley. But nonetheless, Bradley was still able to gauge his power and defense and, you know, speed and all that kind of stuff, strength. And he said, even with 20-ounce gloves on, imagine this, people, even with 20-ounce gloves on, he said Matthysse is still a harder puncher than anyone he's been in the ring with before. With 20-ounce gloves on and headgear, he said his power was incredible. You know, apparently Tim Bradley's team were apprehensive about him sparring Lucas Matthysse, especially, like I said, since Matthysse is basically peaking in training right now, right? He's coming to the pinnacle physically of his training camp. So, and whereas Bradley's just starting training. So his team were very apprehensive about putting him in there with Lucas Matthysse. They thought he could get hurt because obviously he was hurt severely in the Provodnikov fight. And according to Tim Bradley, if you saw the face-off between Bradley and Marquez, according to Bradley, he suffered, you know, neurological problems after the Provodnikov fight for several months. All right, several months. This guy had a concussion, and he was still having slurred speech and stuff like that for I think he said 2 or 3 months after the Provodnikov fight. You know, so maybe what Provodnikov said about Tim Bradley possibly being damaged for the rest of his career after the beating Provodnikov put on him, maybe that's actually true, because that seems pretty damn, you know, pretty damn bad, to be honest. He's suffering neurological problems 2 months after the fight, slurred speech and whatnot. So that's crazy. But anyway, Tim Bradley, being who he is, a very fearless man, he went down there to spar with Matthysse. He said Matthysse hits very hard. He said Matthysse has a better defense than you would expect. But then again, you know, wearing 20-ounce gloves, it's harder to get punches through the gaps and stuff like that, you know, because, you know, the gloves are a lot bigger. So I'm not sure you can gauge someone's defense that well in a sparring session with 20-ounce gloves and headgear. But nonetheless, he said that Matthisse's defense was better than he expected, or, you know, better than people think it is. He said that Matthysse throws very short, tight hooks. You know, pretty much all the stuff we already knew. In terms of the two styles of these fighters, I think that this sparring is going to benefit Lucas Matthysse more than it benefits Tim Bradley. I personally believe, because really and truly, Lucas Matthysse don't fight nothing like Marquez. You know, Lucas Matthysse is not really a counter puncher. I mean, he can throw counters here and there, but he's not really a counter puncher. He's not really as cerebral as Marquez is. Marquez is more likely to set traps for you and, you know, draw you in, whereas Matthysse is going to come forward and put the pressure on you and force you into making mistakes and punish you that way. So two different styles. I think Marquez is also taller than Matthysse, so I don't necessarily think it's great preparation for Bradley. You know, given the fact that Matthysse is not that much like Marquez, and also the fact that Matthysse hits so hard, even with 20-ounce gloves. And Bradley's coming off a knockout defeat. I mean, how's that going to affect him? Bradley said he was never hurt against Matthysse in sparring. You know, he was never shaken or anything like that. But like I said, he's wearing 20-ounce gloves and headgear. Is that going to give Tim Bradley a false sense of confidence going into the Marquez fight? Is he going to think to himself, well, I could take Matthisse's punches, so I can take Marquez's punches. You know, let me try and exchange with Marquez. Is he going to fall into that trap? You know, the Amir Khan syndrome. You never know, man. We'll have to wait and see. He obviously did in the Provodnikov fight. And as for Matthysse sparring Bradley, you know, Bradley's not as powerful as Danny Garcia, not as tall as Danny Garcia, but he does have legs, right? I think he's got, in fact, I know he's got better movement than Danny Garcia. So if Danny Garcia does come into the Matthysse fight and try and give Matthysse a bit of movement, I think Matthysse will be able to deal with it. Having sparred with Tim Bradley, who I'm sure was moving all over the place, although Bradley was probably a little, you know, maybe a little overweight. I'm not saying he was fat, but he's just starting his training camp. So, you know, he's not likely to be anywhere as light as he's going to be in, you know, the final weeks before the fight. So he's probably not at his sharpest, but nonetheless, I still think he'd probably be moving around a lot better than Danny Garcia, flashing a jab and whatnot. So if Danny Garcia does decide to use stick and move tactics, Lucas Matthysse will probably be able to handle it, you know, because Tim Bradley's really quite good at the stick and move stuff. Yeah, if you've watched his career, if you followed his career closely like I have, he's quite good at the stick and move tactics. You know, he's quite good at that. And yeah, like I said, I think this sparring is going to benefit Lucas Matthysse more than Tim Bradley. But, you know, hats off to both guys, man, for taking such high quality sparring. You know, hats off to both guys. It's not often that you see two guys who are, you know, two of the top guys in their divisions. Matthysse is either the number 1 or number 2 guy at 140, and Bradley's one of the top guys at 147 pounds. So it's not often you see two guys and, you know, one of them's a champion and the other one, I guess, is a champion without the belts, you know, sparring with each other before two big high profile fights. It's pretty unusual. So yeah, hats off to both guys, man, for, you know, getting in the tough work. But that's just my feeling, man. I think this is going to benefit Matthysse a lot more than it will benefit Bradley. And one thing I'll say as well before I end this video is that, you know, Tim Bradley said that Lucas Matthysse hits way harder than Provodnikov. And that's with 20-ounce gloves on. So if that's the case, I mean, I know Tim Bradley is a brave guy and he's not, you know, he's not one to be afraid. But, you know, if I was him, or I was his team, I would keep him well away from Lucas Matthysse. If he somehow gets past Marquez, and that's obviously no foregone conclusion, but if he somehow gets past Marquez, you know, I would stay well away from Lucas Matthysse, man. You know, if he thought he had problems with Provodnikov, Matthysse is Provodnikov, you know, ×2. So yeah, that's just my take on it, man. So leave your comments in the comment section below. How do you feel about this sparring session? Who do you think it will benefit? Do you think it will damage Bradley even more? Like I said, they were scheduled to spar even more this week. I think they sparred once last week, and they're scheduled to spar again a couple times this week. So, you know, Bradley might end up getting hurt in sparring, dropped. Who knows, man? You know, who knows? How will that affect him in the Marquez fight? Or will he be able to take Mathisse's punches in sparring, and then that gives him a full sense of security and he goes into the Marquez fight feeling like he's invincible again? You know, but drop your comments in the comment section below. This is Hatman. I'm out.